My name is Nicolaj. I'm mainly an entrepreneur, but I'm going to talk, and of course I'm an investor. But I'll not talk really about funding today, because actually the most important thing I think as startups should do is try to avoid investors. Because you rather have that the four of you own the company than the four of you and me. Because you're the one who are on a mission to start a company. And even though I think I'm a good guy or whatever, I'm always will be the external person. So you like to keep as much equity internally as you can. So basically, even though I should say otherwise, but actually start with the team. And that's what we'll talk about today. Blah, blah, blah. Before we start about team, we should actually discuss why a team is so important. And the team is so important because this one will not happen to you. We all hear about these stories. Oh my God, I just started my company and then they called and I sold after X month. It will never happen. Or you can say, yes, it will happen, but lottery, winning in the lottery also happens, right? And there's a bigger chance winning in the lottery than this happens to you. So if that's what you're for, you should actually play the lottery. Because in basically all the startups I'm in, and all the successful startups I know, it's a long, long journey. And the normal journey for a startup, even in so-called scalable businesses like software, it's a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old journey. I just talked to one of my friends the other day, and he sold his company two years ago, and that was 13 years. It was a software company, 13 years. So when we talk about why we should care about teams and people, that is basically because this will not happen. I don't know that many people who have successfully sold a company before 3-4 years. Can it happen? Yes, but it's really, really rare. Most likely, it will be like this. This is the most appropriate picture of how it is to do a startup. And that's a problem, because what we read in the newspaper is opposite. We read the newspaper when they already made it, right? When they're sort of already successful, because that's basically by nature a law, right? When successful, a lot of people hear about the startup. That's in year 6, 7, 8. Oh my God, now they just closed this big funding round, now they're successful, now they're sold. But then you should move back and say, but when did they start? And when looking at the company register, you'll find out that they actually started 8, 9 years ago. And if you ask them about how the first 2 or 3, 4 years were, sort of like this. All the successful companies or startups I know of have been close to bankruptcy several times. It's not because it's fun. It's never fun. It's never fun to sit and say, hey, we're not sure we can pay salary in next month. What do we do? It's never fun to fire people. So it's not because we like it. But when you work with innovation and you work with new stuff, then this happens. If you want to avoid this and do a startup, then you should do a consulting company in a well-known area, do a web agency setting. You can get customers for day one. You know the product, the market. You know, most likely not be there. But if you work with innovative stuff where you have to convince the customers that they have a need, you have to build something new, you have to sell it to them, you have to recruit a lot of employees, this happens. I wish it wasn't so. I try to avoid most of the bankruptcy, but it will just happen. And actually, when you look statistically on that, if the 80 people in here or whatever create companies right now within IT, 1/3 of you sort of will be left after 4 years. The rest will have closed your business. And out of these 1/3, most of them will not really be successful yet. A few of them will. When you look at VC funds, it's actually approximately 1 in 10 that is really, really successful. So that's not to take the spirit away from you for doing startups, because that's the reason why I like to do startups, because it's really, really fun and it's challenging, it's interesting, and the best learning experience I ever had. But you'll have to learn with this. I'll just give you a real example. And I found this email today. So 6.5 years ago, I had a dialogue with one of my best friends, Jakob, about we want to do a digital signature platform. 6.5 years ago. So when I now brag online or whatever how good that company goes, think, when was that company started? It was not formally started in March 11, but that's when the first time we really thought about it and said, hey, we should do this for an MID. We should do a Danish version of this. Right? 6.5 years ago. But things take time. Build product, recruit people, find the first customer, etc., etc. So now it looks like this. This is actually revenue per quarter, per year. So we sort of started in 13. The first really year was 14. And look. So yes, now we're cash flow positive, whatever, but it takes time. And it's not even started here, right? We actually started here. But that was more like R&D, oh my God. And of course, there are many reasons why it takes time. In our case, we basically had to change most of the assumptions. We also had a silly company name and a silly logo, and now we are something completely different. And the rule of actually in startup is that most of our assumptions, yeah, it's really, we actually thought it was cool. Oh my, dog, cloud, dog, yeah. Okay. Is it the world's best logo? No. No, I'm just saying, in basically all the startups I know of, you have some assumptions. Oh, we want to solve this problem for this customer group. And Mike Tyson haven't said that many smart things, but he said one smart thing, and that is everyone has a plan until they're smacked in the face. And that's basically like a startup. You start there with a fantastic idea, you're drawn up there, da-da-da-da-da-da, first customer, that's shit, boom, right? And this is just, I could tell war stories about all my startups. And this is even for those, one of those who've been successful. Have we been close to bankruptcy many times? Yes. Not the last 2 years, but the first 3 years was really, really tough, right? Now we're 30 employees, growing rapidly, we're all happy. And when you know how hard it is to come to that point, you really enjoy it even more. That was the background. Again, not to take the spirit away, it's just like, that's how it is to do a startup. Don't believe what you read in the newspaper. It's really, really tough work. And that's maybe one of the hardest things about this entrepreneurship hype we have right now, is that we get all the attention on, oh my God, these were sold, these exited, whatever. And no one really talks about, yeah, but it's only 1 out of 10, and we have 90% struggling. So what should you do with your team? Who do you need? I have a few assumptions why I conclude, and let's go back. My first assumption is that you need different skills in a startup. And it's not like there's one personality type that is great for startups, because actually you need several of them, right? Most likely you need someone to build a product and someone to do something else. Most likely one is extrovert, most likely one is introvert. I just say that it's very unlikely that you have all the skills. I simply don't believe when I meet a one-person founder who says, I can do this. And even if you can, it will almost be impossible for you to convince people like me, because we've seen so many times that it didn't work. So my base assumption is there's something missing if you're the only alone. Of course you can say, couldn't the solution just be to outsource it? Couldn't the solution be to say, hey, I have this idea for a software product, but I can't code, but I can sell. So I just find this company to do it for me. They are charging 30 euro an hour, I have the money, I do it. And if you ask people that have tried outsourcing of core skills in early stage startups, then they will tell a lot of war stories on how it didn't work. And to summarize why it doesn't work is actually because you're shooting at a moving target. Because all these assumptions are changing, right? So if I work in an outsourced company, then you hire this company and he had this specification and that is what he's delivering. And he starts programming. And at the same time, you are talking with customers. And day 3, you said, hey, you should build something else because the customers want it in red and not in green. And that doesn't work. It will be too expensive, too slow, whatever. You need people here that can do it. And it goes for both the development part and for the more extrovert sales part. It's really, really hard to outsource that. And I once saw this quote, which I think is quite fun. It's like regarding software companies. So building a software company and launch an app without having any software developers on the team is basically like starting a rock band without being able to sing or play any instrument. It's really hard, right? It's just like, I have an idea for a rock band. I want to do Rolling Stones. I can't do any. I will hire these persons and then they'll play for me. Doesn't really work. It's okay I can only sing, or okay I can only play the guitar, but I most likely will need someone. Again, it's just my assumptions. So based upon that, I'm a very simple guy, and I conclude two things. When I look at a startup, and when most serial entrepreneurs look at a startup, they think in your head, can these create and can they sell? Create meaning, can they actually make the product that can solve this problem? That can be hardware if you're doing some hardware. It can be software. If you're doing a restaurant, it's a chef. If you're doing a fashion product, it's a designer. You know, you see it where I'm going. Do we have those? It's really, really hard to outsource that, as I just told, because the more innovative you are, or your idea is, the more this goal will change. But the same goes for the sales part, especially for the really, really technical projects, where there's a tendency for 4 PhDs sitting together and have invented this fantastic thing. And if you're really, really great PhD in some nerdy technologies, there's a big chance that you're a really, really lousy salesperson. Because there's a reason why you decided to close the door, sit there in the lab for 8 years. While if you were a really extrovert salesperson, you most likely don't have the time to sit there for 8 years, you'll be partying, right? And also remember, selling is not only selling to customers. It's also selling to the media, selling to partners, selling to employees. In other words, expand, as you just heard, the network. That is a full-time job. Even though you're still in R&D mode, it's a big job to go out. And of course, you could say, isn't that 2 persons? Could that be 2 persons? Yes, but there's at least these roles. And I would actually be afraid of having too big a team initially. Because when you have these, sometimes I meet these student projects that started as a student project, and I want to create a company, and then I ask, how many are you on a team? Oh, we're 18, right? Yeah, I don't know these, we 2 groups, we actually merged together or whatever. The problem is, when everyone has responsibility, no one has responsibility. You need to have someone who is in charge of R&D and selling. That's, again, my simple view on this. And of course, this is the early days. Then when you reach a later stage, maybe you're launched, maybe you have a marketing function, maybe this become an R&D team. But initially, you need a small team. Also because if you are really 8 people, it becomes very expensive. And there's a big risk that you'll be running out of cash before you actually made it. So what I'm looking for, and what I think you should be looking for, is 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe a bit too much, a team that can do this. That will be my advice to you. Not for investors, because as I said, you should really try to avoid investors, but for your own sake. You need this small team. Also because if you spread your equity around 10 persons, suddenly each one is diluted so much, so you don't really feel it as my project, because I only have 10%. Where if there's 2 or 3 persons, it's still your project. There's actually also some good data behind this. This is Startup Genome, who actually analyzed, I think, 3,000 mainly American, mainly IT startups. And without going into detail, the one conclusion were, if they have both a business founder and a technical founder, there's a much higher chance of success. They then define success as raising more money, more users, less risk of failing, etc. So have that in mind. Dedicated persons on both the sales side and the product side. That would be my advice. Let's take one example. This is actually a company which I met through CBS. where I teach. And CapDesk is, in short, the very short version, a shareholder management tool. So any company needs to have a shareholder register. It's mandatory basically all over the world. So they will need to go to me and say, Nicolaj, where's the list of shareholders? Okay, you can see the list here. It actually most often is in paper form or Excel. And then what happens when we issue warrants to employees or raise money, it has to be updated and signed, and no one really has that. So what CapDesk is trying to solve is this pain regarding shares, warrants, whatever. You can call it an ERP system for shares and warrants. Does it make sense? Initially, I didn't want to invest because I knew Casper very well. And Casper is a fantastic, he was my former student at CBS, fantastic salesperson, very likable, very extrovert, driven, energetic, smart. Great guy. He teamed up with Christian, who's also sort of the same type. Of course, they're different, but sort of the same type. And not only that, they have worked together in another company. That is great, because then I knew that they actually knew each other. So the risk of falling apart was small. It was also great that they actually worked in another crowdfunding company called Funded by Me, meaning they have industry expertise. So these formal qualifications, and when they saw there was a problem and how they can solve it, I thought, hey, that makes sense. But they couldn't find a CTO. They've tried many months, or some months, and they actually come to the conclusion they couldn't find one. So the idea were to use an outsourcing company in India. Nothing wrong with that. It could be a Danish outsourcing company or Ukraine or whatever. But I just say, again, but the platform we're going to build is not a simple app. It's actually quite complex. And if you're going to do a simple app and can't find a CTO, I would actually say it might make sense to do outsourcing initially to build some kind of proof, and then you find the CTO afterwards, right? That could make sense. But in this case, I thought it was just a dead end. So I said, hey, I'm interested to invest when you have found the technical team. The good thing were that actually the efforts paid off. And Martin and Mikkel, they're really, really skilled. They both have the formal education in computer science. They have worked for one of the most renowned IT development companies in Denmark, check. And they have actually jumped out and created their own consulting company 2 years ahead, check. They were actually quite successful in that. So they both have the formal education. They have actually also management experience, and they have experience for running their own company, so they knew what they got into. And when these two came, I thought, this is really interesting now and I'll do the same for you. If I were you and had to create a company, I would really rather spend 6 months chasing the other part of the equation than starting something without the proper team. It would also be very, very hard for you later on to get funding if you need it at some point in time without the proper team. So you can say the formal qualifications are great because, I'm a non-coder. I can't do software. So I have to trust what they've done in the past. I can't look into Martin and Mikkel's code. Oh, that's fine code. But I can just say, hey, they have the education. They have worked in industry. They have been promoted several times. They have done their own company and actually worked with high-profile customers, right? And the same for Casper and Christian. I knew they could tell. But I'll just warn you against only focusing on the formal qualifications. Because when you really sit down with people and ask why you are interested in entrepreneurship, my very unscientific conclusion is it's often a combination of these three. Either people are in it because they think this is a way to get rich, and I actually warn against that because risk-adjusted is a lousy thing. I think actually, again, risk-adjusted because most startups fail. It would be better to work in a bank or in a corporate world where you can actually make a lot of money. If you're a good developer, oh my God, you can make a lot of money in a big company. If you're a good salesperson, that's really, really good. Selling corporate software, really good. But that's okay, right? Also see a number of people come into entrepreneurship because they want to have a certain lifestyle. They hate bosses, they want to control their own time, they rather sit here and do what they like instead of being ordered to do something and have to be in the office at 8 o'clock, etc., etc. And finally, I see people that are impact driven. They want to make this a better place. This can then be Denmark, it can be for entrepreneurship, it can be women's rights, it can be lower pollution, it can be, you name it. And most of us are sort of all three, right? Many of us started with a lot of focus on this when we're young, and then it goes on. The reason why I say that is not to be philosophical, but that is because for the same business idea, you can take in very, very different directions. So assume you were, let's take CapDisk as an example. If you're in this for the money and want to be either really filthy rich, then most likely you need to go really, really big on this and say, how can we be the biggest platform in the world? That would often require a high-risk strategy, a lot of work, and being diluted by taking in external investors, most likely. If you, on the other hand, are doing this startup because you like to have a nice lifestyle, don't want to work that much, you actually found out if you're independent, you can work less and have the same money. Then you want to sit in here, chill out, take 2 weeks off or whatever. That's perfectly fine. It's just a completely different company, right? Because then you'll say, why should we take venture capital in? We have made a good, solid business in Denmark. That's fine. And again, if you want to have an impact investment, then you maybe want to get your platform to Africa and connect African investors and entrepreneurs, despite there's no money in that. Can you see it? So can you imagine if you're 3 persons and come with this business idea, and now we want to make a company, and you haven't really aligned what you're going to do. And it sounds like a silly example, but I see it again and again. I see it, you start a company, and 6 months later, sort of you want to go in different directions. Should we take money in? No, because then I lose control. Yeah, but I want to take money in because I want to make this big. If I were you, I would really spend time on, maybe over red wine, find out what are you really trying to do. And in philosophical terms, you have to find out, we know this journey will be long, and we can't really foresee the future, but at least you have to visualize where do you want to be. Are we going to make a big company? Are we going to make a social entrepreneurship company? Are we going to, what are we going to do? And that actually involves passing the beer test, right? Because if you're going to, it's quite fun, right? Here we actually have Christian, you have the Peneo guys sitting there. And one smart person said to me, there are no beers, there's only red wine. That's true, there might be some beers behind. The point is here that when you're going to do startups, you're going to spend more time with these persons than your family for the next 7 to 10 years, which is basically, I guess, the length of an average marriage or something like that, right? Can you see? 40% are divorced, yeah, you know, and you're spending not only, your wife is from what, 5 to 10? 5 hours a day? This is 10 hours a day. Now my point is just that you have really to look people in the eyes and say, do I believe I can work with these persons for the next 10 years? And actually I normally don't do startups with friends, but the fun thing is it becomes friends because you're going through so much shit together that, you know, and so we're going to Spain again. We have these workshops 2 times a year. We're going to Spain again in 2 weeks. Fantastic, right? Started this business, now they're friends. But despite all that trust and all that you're going to do, you need to get your agreements down on paper. And you need to get it down on paper on day 1. And maybe the day 1 version is just some notes on a paper, and maybe the legalized version is in month 3 or 6. I'm not saying you do that in day 1. But you start to take these really, really nasty questions, which are, for instance, so we now start the company, we share the assets, whatever. What happens if you want to leave the company after 2 years? Should you be allowed to keep your shares? Should they be forced to sell it to us? At which price? What happens if you're divorced? should your ex-wife be a shareholder in the company? Can you see? Really not, you're starting there, you're really hyped. It's not that funny to have these discussions, but I can just say one thing. You want to have it at day 1 or month 3 maybe, not in year 2. Because when you have a problem, you try to solve it all the other ways, but this is your last resort. And having this in place is great because you don't really want to use it. You don't want to be in court with anyone. It's a pain in the ass. Don't do it. But it's just great. You have your backup plan here, and then you try to solve things nicely. If there's no contract, let's assume I'm a co-founder of one of your companies. I own 20%. I leave the company. You cannot legally force me to sell your shares. What if you want to exit your company? No buyer wants to buy 80% of the company, also wants to be my shares. I sit and I travel in Southeast Asia, whatever, I decided not to sell. You need to have these agreements down. But the problem is, there's actually a theory for that called incomplete contract theory. And that is, you can't design a contract that takes everything in consideration. Even though lawyers want to say that to you, it doesn't exist. That basically means that the final thing you need to look for in people is ethical things. How do they behave? And people who say, oh my God, it's legal, so I do it. There's a lot of ethical things or legal things that I wouldn't do, right? And what is okay for you is not okay for me, or vice versa. But I'll really try, and you can't test this is gut feeling, right? This is something after spending some time with people, you know how they behave. But this I will never sacrifice, again, because this is not a 2-year journey, this is a 10-year journey. So how do you get started on all that team creation, whatever? I think, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. That's also the reason why I'm here again and again, because I think such a place like this is the place. Many reasons. First of all, you come here not because you have to, because you want to. In the evening, where you could be drinking beers down there, you come here. Fantastic sign. You come here, you're very diverse, both from your nationalities, gender, and also your background. Technical, design, business. Fantastic environment to sit with like-minded people and want to start something. And I actually think that the most important thing is to get started, because maybe the first startup you do is not the next whatever, Just Eat, whatever. But I see it like learning to play any kind of sport. You're not starting with 6 years old and play soccer and expect to be at playing for Barcelona in 6 months, right? There's a lot of practice. And entrepreneurship is like any other craftsmanship, is that it takes time to learn. How do I actually learn to sell? Well, how do I get the first customers on board? How do I attract cool team members? How do I do whatever? That's a learning process. But start and use the opportunity by having this diverse team. And the great thing is, right, you are well funded, right? So no, honestly, I think starting as a student is a great way to learn, because it is this long journey of 10 years or whatever, so you have to be sure. You can't foresee the future, but you have to be sure there's something in it, and these persons are some people I really want to work with. So it's great to take a few months, maybe longer, and test the idea, build a prototype while you're studying, whatever. Fantastic. You have funding for that. Relax, take the time. I'll just say that at some point in time you have to jump. I never met a startup that becomes successful as a part-time thing. You'll never get this hockey stick thing before you work full-time on it. Maybe that's not all the team, maybe it's only 2 of the 3 team members. Maybe some of you are working as a bartender or whatever in the night to pay the bills. That's great. But it has to be not the 20% of the week, but the 80%. So you spend the rest of the time doing the thing to make this work financially, but the thing that you start with Monday morning is this. The problem is, and I can talk from experience, that is that when it's the opposite around, then you have decided with your team fellows to Thursday and Friday afternoon or night, you work on it. And that just means that it's only that something really happens. And the day before, all the team members are trying to get the stuff done that they promised. And it just means that it never really takes off. But again, start slow. Start by finding your team members, finding the problem you want to solve. Test your assumptions in the market. Make sure these are the right people you want to work with. At some point in time, you have to quit your studies. Or you have to say, I finished my studies, I don't take this job. And this is honestly really the hard point, right? Because now you have studied for so long time, and then, I should not take this nice job, right? Here's my gift. You want marshmallows? It's really, really nice marshmallows, right?
By the way, about the people, when we're building a team.
What?
About the people, when we're building a team.
Yeah.
If I understand that this person has really nice skills.
Yeah.
So, but I can't work with him, but I hate this personality. But his skills can be really useful for my project. Should I continue?
No.
So I need to be
You don't have to be friends with people.
No, I'm just comfortable. I'm just trying to.
Okay, let me take that afterwards. I just want to take one thing.
She's too sexy.
Have you ever heard about the marshmallow experiment? Yeah. I see entrepreneurship as the marshmallow experiment in real life. Because the marshmallow experiment started at Stanford in the 60s or late 60s, and they actually set kids next to a marshmallow, right? And then you said this to this 3 or 4 year old kid and said, hey kid, you can have this marshmallow now, but now mom and dad are leaving the room. And if you haven't ate that marshmallow when we're back in 10 minutes, you get 2. So of course, there were 2 groups of kids. One group who ate the marshmallow, and one group who said, hey, if I wait, I get 2. And they followed these 2 groups of kids. And it's the best indication of success, much better than IQ or whatever, whether these kids actually delayed the gratification. And this is like startup, because when you're out and finish your studies, you're well educated, you can get really, really nice jobs. And there you have to say, do I really want it that bad? Do I want to take this high-paid job now? Or I'm going to delay my marshmallow? Maybe there will not be a marshmallow in the future. Maybe they will be rotten. Maybe someone have stolen it. But that's what you believe in. And it's not a one-time thing, right? Because all these phases where your startup is being close to bankruptcy, you'll have to consider, should I take this marshmallow now? Because then the cool companies call, right? The McKinseys, the Goldman Sachs, the Facebook or Googles, whatever, depending on which industry you're in. And they will call you and say, we really like to hire on this corporate innovation role with a nice package. And that's really hard. So I think my last comment to you is that entrepreneurship is not for everyone. And right now we are in the hype where everyone believes that they have to do it because it's part of the media, whatever. I, of course, like it a lot. But maybe if people really knew how tough it were, a lot of people wouldn't start it. That's at least right. So just one thing, so if you decide to do it, I'll just say that never do it alone. This task is simply too crazy to do on your own. You can't buy the resources out there. You have to start with a few good people. And the fantastic thing is, when you have these few good people, they will attract even better people, because good people want to work with even smarter people. And that means that if your starting point, the first 2 or 3 persons are really, really, really cool, then you get amazing people. And I was asked by a journalist a few months ago, what's my biggest learning in all this? I was really, I think my biggest learning is that if you have a really, really smart, dedicated team, small team, they can really do miracles. And you're only 4 persons, but you can outcompete these 1,000 and 10,000 person companies because you're really dedicated and you're just doing stuff much, much better. And this is actually the picture from I think it's already outdated from Peneo, and now there are 30 people. And I'm just so happy, and it all started by us being lucky and meet these first 2 or 3 or 4 people. When you have them, a lot of things can happen. So start with a team, and all this about business plan and all that, the market has to be fantastic, whatever. You can fix that because you're changing stuff anyways. But there's one thing you can't change, that is the people. So when you said to a person, yeah, I can, was it tolerate? What's the word you used? This person, you can be comfortable. Yeah. Is that good enough? I'll also be worried that if you are only comfortable with that person, can you then attract other people? It's not only you, right? It's like when you're hiring a salesperson and you have the meeting, if that salesperson cannot sell him or herself to you, can that person sell? Because salesperson have to be manipulators, right? If they can't sell to me, can they then sell? And it's the same. If you think this person is sort of annoying, the chance is that many of us will do the same. Cool. Thank you very much.